Alex? Jess? What happened?
Welcome back to the channel, and in today's video we're going to be reviewing The Boys Trigger Warning on MetaQuest 3, and this is also coming to PlayStation VR 2 in the future. It's extremely rare to see a massive IP like The Boys, which had over 55 million viewers for Season 4 alone, come to VR. Developed by Arvor, they have definitely tried their best to keep this as faithful to the TV show as possible by using the real voice of Mother's Milk actor Lax Alonso, who definitely takes centre stage in this game, closely followed by Billy Butcher, who is voiced by a different voice actor, but it is honestly impossible to tell it isn't the real actor Carl Urban, and he's probably one of the best voice impersonators I've ever heard.
This is his last chance, love.
The narrative in The Boys Trigger Warning is delivered by both these guys for 90% of the game, and they never get old to listen to. It's a good story of revenge, which leans into the Boys universe extremely well, and it doesn't hold back on the use of bad language or violence. You also have Convo with Soldier Boy, who goes hard on telling you all the things no one wants to hear about themselves, and is constantly on a mission trying to put you down. And I feel in VR we don't get many narrative-driven games, but this is the main focus of The Boys, and the story does work very hard to keep the player engaged. The gameplay is all about using your own soup powers to get revenge on the family of soups known as the Armstrongs that killed yours. This involves using your permanent telekinesis ability, which is very cool to use, especially opening vents with the flick of a wrist, or you get to dual wield random stuff laying around to kill guards, and you can also teleport around infinitely. All of your other powers involve injecting Temp V, which you'll find as you go through the game, and if you watch the show, you'll be aware it slowly kills normal human beings. And that's because Temp V is unstable, is highly concentrated, and is a temporary chemical agent that causes fatal brain damage. But in the case of soups like Homelander, for example, he's been permanently altered by Compound V. Every mission or chapter, of which there are 7, involves breaking into Vault Tower, finding intel, key cards, hacking terminals, and is a mix mostly of killing and sneaking around. You have to collect Temp V vials on the fly to keep using your powers, and the injectors are then stored on your waist. And these powers either make you invisible, so then you can get past security cameras or guards, or you grow large crystal-like spiky hands that you'll use to slice guards in half, or they can be used to deflect bullets. And later on in the game you'll get laser vision, which is easily the coolest power of them all and does feel great to use. The gameplay length was stated as 10 hours to me by the developers, but for some reason it only took me 4.5 hours, and I did actually die quite a lot. The reasons I died in this game was mostly from teleporting mistakes, and there's a scene where you are chased by Homelander where I died at least 8 or maybe even 10 times due to a mixture of issues that you may get to understand a bit better as the review goes on. Your health regenerates pretty quickly, and this is displayed as blood on your face, but it actually looks like you're wearing some sort of invisible space helmet. There's all the comfort options you would expect, but weirdly this game is recommended as best played seated, so I went with what the game recommended, but please take note, recentering doesn't take into account your head height, so you have to actually go into the options and choose if you're tall or short. It's a bit weird, but there we are. So now onto the part of the review I'm very sad to report on, because it's clear these guys have definitely put in some effort in some areas, but for all those efforts, The Boys Trigger Warning is a very uncomfortable VR game to play. The frame rate performance can look pretty disastrous at times, and is definitely dynamic, because sometimes it looks smooth as butter when you're just standing there talking to the characters, but then the gameplay starts and it's kind of up and down and all over the place, and it can get pretty bad. The game hovers around 32 to 36 frames per second by default, because the developers are relying on asynchronous space warp to keep the game as close to a steady frame rate as possible. So I tested The Boys Trigger Warning using Quest Optimizer, and there is some gains to using this software with The Boys, especially with an unlocked dynamic frame rate, a slightly lower resolution, and fixed foveated rendering, and obviously no asynchronous space warp. But overall, no matter what I did, it didn't really matter. For me, it's pretty impossible to have what I would consider a smooth and comfortable frame rate playing on Quest 3. And the real pity of this all is The Boys Trigger Warning actually looks pretty good in some areas. The guards are literally the same 3 types throughout the game, and the guards that have no headwear actually all have the same face. But there is some nice reflections and some nice baked in shadows, but ultimately the heavy use of asynchronous space warp, which is how the game is designed to be played, leaves the player seeing just a horrible wobbling effect, especially with your hands, and especially when things get busy in the game. It's either badly optimized or the game simply simply can't run on a Quest 3, and overall I'm pretty surprised it's released this way. Even though I don't suffer from motion sickness, playing this game for more than 30 minutes just gets tiring. The boys trigger warning though is also coming to PSVR 2, and this version will be built on the Quest version, so I would expect a rock solid 90 FPS for that platform. But now we move on to the next part of the review, and unfortunately, even if we did have a smooth frame rate, it might not save the game anyway for a lot of players. Every mission is the same recipe, only broken up by a couple of boss encounters, which I'll also go into in a minute, but the cycle goes like this. You get a briefing in a kitchen, you get another mini briefing in a van, you break into Vault Tower, which usually involves just walking through a door, or you find yourself already inside the building, and then you find things like codes or fuses, crawl through vents, hack terminals with zero skill, and then you leave. After the third chapter of this recipe, I could have easily given up if it wasn't for the story and obviously to do this review. It feels extremely repetitious, and gameplay wise it does feel a little bit lazy. For example, why isn't hacking terminals its own minigame? We've seen this used in hundreds of games, but instead they've chosen for players to just wave their arms up and down, whacking a virtual keyboard, and honestly it makes you feel pretty stupid. Unfortunately as well, the NPCs don't really offer any threat. Even though there's alarms going off everywhere, you wouldn't really know this is happening, because once you kill all the guards, which is also pretty easy to do because there's lots of random tools and knives laying around in the corridors, which I also need to add does get very boring after a while, just wandering around the same corridors all the time, and you do end up getting a bit of corridor fatigue. And overall, with all these items laying around, you can literally clear a level of all guards within minutes. The main characters, Mother's Milk and Butcher, don't look at you as you wander around the game after they're done talking to you, which is a bit bizarre in a game that's clearly had a lot of effort put into it in other ways. Where's the random convos or backstory or anything to actually stop these guys looking like statues between briefings? The boss fights are mediocre and not really that rewarding, and the end boss fight, which is probably the biggest one with the biggest set pieces, didn't really feel that great to complete anyway. So overall, the boys trigger warning unfortunately doesn't get a buy recommendation from me, unless you're a really hardcore fan of the show. If you are a fan of the show and you can put up with the stumbling and I personally think uncomfortable frame rates, plus everything else I've said, there is going to be something here for you. But this is an average game with a good story. For everyone else though, this is a badly delivered game, making games like Red Matter 2 and Batman seemingly miracles on Quest 3. And ultimately, even as a fan of the show, it's not a game I looked forward to putting on a headset on to play. It's got some good things going on, especially with the telekinesis powers, but even if it did perform well, it's still a very average gameplay experience. But as I said, with a good story and some sporadically cool moments. I will give it another shot on PSVR 2, especially if they use eye tracking for the laser vision, which would raise my review from an avoid to maybe wait for a sale recommendation, but we'll have to wait and see. I personally find it incredibly hard to ignore a bad performing game in VR. Even more so than on a flat screen, and it's a shame the boys trigger warning has ended up this way. Well, that's all I've got for you today. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and I'll see you on the next one.